Hi, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe even for some of our participants, it's a good evening. Welcome to today's webinar, Teaching Data Skills to Entrepreneurs. It is organized by the Dataset Project Consortium. Dataset is a European-wide Erasmus Plus initiative that aims to help business advisors, entrepreneurship educators, and in general, entrepreneurship education providers to understand, teach, and develop smart data skills. We thank you all for finding time in your busy schedules to be here with us today. My name is Alexandra Zinovieva. I am the Senior Project Officer at University Industry Innovation Network, and I will be your moderator for today. So in this webinar, we have an exciting lineup of speakers talking about the importance of data skills for the future of work. We also have some guest speakers as real-life examples of entrepreneurs and at the same time being business advisors, educators, and mentors themselves, and have significant insights into data and data skills development. And more than that, today we will examine the data skills development curriculum that is already ready to be integrated into the training offers of business advisors and entrepreneurship educators. We will also peek into a self-learning platform where entrepreneurs and business owners can learn and practice the skills by themselves. Well, before I dive into the introductions of our esteemed speakers, I would like to highlight that due to a high number of registrations, all our webinar attendees will be muted. Well, however, we do encourage you to interact with us. At the bottom of your Zoom panel, you can see a button Q&A. If you think a speaker raised an interesting point or you have a good question, please do not hesitate to put it in the Q&A. If somebody already asked your question and you really want to hear the answer to it, you can always like it and upvote it. And it will go to the top, higher probability that we will all see it. So now, let me go back to our agenda for today, and it comprises 7 speakers. Today we will start with Dataset Project Introduction by the coordinator of the initiative, Jonathan McAlpin, who is the CEO of East Belfast Enterprise in the UK. We will then dive into the subject matter with the presentation about the Guide to Data Skills Development from Sonia Neiba, who is a communications and project specialist at Momentum Consulting Services in Ireland. That will lead us to the gem of our webinar, the curriculum for basic data skills development that everybody can integrate into their training. This dataset open educational resource, hence curriculum, will be presented by Miguel Ángel Sicilia, professor of computer science and data scientist himself, and also mentor himself from University of Alcalá, Spain. We are happy to continue the discussion with our panel of guest speakers, highlighting their own experiences with data analysis and their perspectives on training basic data skills and the need for that. Our guest speakers are Alfred Utku, the founder and the president of European Leadership University. It's a new generation university providing, developing, recruiting and retaining talent for exceptional organizations through bespoke degree programs. He is certainly an educational entrepreneur himself. Then we have Anne-Marie McSorley, a training industry expert and the CEO of Fioro Software Solutions, with their award-winning app, Very. This app helps to digitalize paperwork and also deals with data. And we have David Blanc, a business intelligence expert and the founder and the CEO of Division Works, TVW. It's a German-based consultancy focusing on strategy, innovation, and restructuring. And we will conclude our webinar with the practical self-learning platform introduction by Anya Hamil from Canis Consulting, Ireland. So, well, why don't we dive into it? And I would like to invite Jonathan, our first speaker and the coordinator of the Dataset Consortium, to kick this session off. Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Alex, and thank you everybody for attending today's webinar, and I hope you find it useful. Just to kick off, as Alex has said, I'm going to just give a very brief overview of what the project is about and why we chose to embark on this project, the Dataset project. The world, as we know, is awash with data, and it's never been easier to access it. The growth of the internet and social media platforms has been exponential. There are approximately 6,000 tweets sent every second on Twitter. Hopefully you're tweeting them all right now. That amounts to approximately 200 billion tweets in a year. And how do I know that? I Googled it. When my 8-year-old football fanatic son wants to know, when was the first World Cup won? Who won it? Where was it played? And what was the score in the final? I don't have to rack my brains or spend hours scoring through reference books. I just type a quick question into a search engine and up pops the answer. And when he asks who was the youngest player ever to play in the World Cup finals, Google has the answer. And to put you out of your misery, it was held in 1930 in Uruguay. It was won by Uruguay, and they defeated Argentina 4-2 in the final. Just a wee bit of trivia for you. So what's the point I'm making? Data is all around us. We can access it at our fingertips. We use it every day as we navigate our way through life, but how well is it understood by business leaders and entrepreneurs to create competitive advantage to help them grow their businesses? In our research that the partnership carried out as we developed this project, we found that data is often misunderstood. It's underused and often feared by many entrepreneurs and small business owners. Terms like big data and smart data, these can be barriers where entrepreneurs associate data with big business, with large departments of technical wizards crunching numbers, but don't see the relevance of data to their own businesses. Micro and small enterprises in the UK, Ireland, and right across Europe are about 99% of business that we have operating on these islands and on this continent. Entrepreneurship education occupies a key role in Europe for the 2020 strategy for growth and jobs. We've developed the Dataset project to contribute to improvements in the quality and relevance of entrepreneurship education. By helping entrepreneurship educators to understand, teach, and develop smart data, thus providing business owners, early stage entrepreneurs, and business students with solid smart data skills and training, which they will be able to use to help grow their own businesses. We want to make data accessible. We want to demystify the language. And in the end of the day, it is all just information. So what is Dataset and how did it come about? Well, in 2018, we brought together a partnership comprising Momentum Marketing Services in the Republic of Ireland, Canis Consulting Limited in Northern Ireland, Technical Education in Copenhagen, Denmark, a technical college, University Industry Innovation Network, our partners who today are hosting the event from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and the University of Alcalá in Spain, with ourselves in the lead role of the partnership, ourselves being an enterprise organisation based in Belfast in Northern Ireland. The partnership put together the project plans and submitted an application to the Erasmus Plus programme under Measure KA 202. They liked what we proposed and agreed to fund us for a 2-year project. The project started in December 2018 and the funded phase of the project will complete at the end of August of this year, so just a couple of months from now. So what are the main aims and objectives of the project? Well, through this project, we've aimed to help SME managers and entrepreneurs to realise that they don't need to be advanced data analysts to learn how to grow their smart data capacity. And we want to help early stage entrepreneurs and business students to learn how to build data skills into their business plans from the get-go to help capitalise on market opportunities. We aim to equip entrepreneurship educators with resources to teach data skills and to engage with enterprise and economic development stakeholders to emphasise the need to integrate data skills into their interventions, which are used to stimulate and drive economic growth. And to do this, we set out to publish 3 types of intellectual outputs. These will be made freely available through open source via a dedicated project web portal. And you can see behind me that the web address for that web portal, which you can connect it at any time and download these resources for free. But you'll hear more about these later in today's event. The development of each of these involved our partners researching, designing, and sharing intellectual property to create the final published resource. Our colleagues in the Republic of Ireland Momentum Marketing Services led on our first output, which has developed and published the Vocational Education Training Guide to Data Skills Development. This is a publication that introduces the main tenets of data skills and education to entrepreneurs and vet professionals, sharing best practices and ideas for teaching data skills to entrepreneurs. And Sonia from our partners in Momentum will explain more about this in the next presentation. Our second output was led by the University of Alcalá, where we have produced a curriculum, trainer's guide and suite of interactive online learning materials. These will enable teachers and trainers to enhance entrepreneurs' data skills in classroom and small group training. Miguel Angel from Alcalá will join us later to explain more about this output. And our final resource is an interactive online resource. The Dataset online course can be accessed and used by entrepreneurs at all stages of entrepreneurial activity to learn and put data skills into practice. Anya from our partners in Canis Consulting will showcase some of these resources towards the end of our event today. So I haven't much more to say on today in terms of the overall project introduction, but in closing, I would like to put my thanks on record to the funders, the EU Erasmus Plus programme. Without the funding and support that we have received from Erasmus Plus, we simply wouldn't have been able to do this project. So we're very much in gratitude to them. Our partners also you'll hear more about today, and I would like to formally put my thanks on record for them for all the work they've done on this project, and it has been quite significant. And hopefully you'll see the outworkings of that today. And our guest speakers today, Alfred Utku from the founder and president of the European Leadership University in the Netherlands, to Anne-Marie McSorley, the founder and CEO of tech company Very from Kilkenny in Ireland, David Blunk, the founder and CEO of the Vision Works from Halle in Germany. Finally, my last thanks is to you for attending. And I really hope you enjoy the remainder of the event, which will feature great guest speakers who'll share their own experience as academics, educationalists, industry leaders and entrepreneurs. And I can't leave you hanging. The youngest player ever to play in the World Cup finals? Well, those guys that know me know that I couldn't let this opportunity go without a wee plug for our very own, at the age of 17 years, 1 month and 10 days, it was Northern Ireland's very own Norman Whiteside. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the event. And back to you, Alex.
Thank you, Jonathan, for the engaging introduction and for sharing some facts with us as well. I think it set a really good back set for our discussion and the context, and we can move on and take a look at the first intellectual output and also engage into the discussions with the guest speakers later on. So I would like to invite Sonia from one of our partners, Momentum Consulting, to share her presentation on the guide to data skills development, which was the first intellectual output of the datasets project. Sonia, now it's all up to you.
Hi, thanks, Alex. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I know there are probably many events at the moment going on online, and just the fact that you've chosen this one to join us and to learn more about our project, which would put our expertise and just our experience, it really means a lot to us. I'm now going to share my screen with you, and hopefully you're going to see it better here. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, there we go. As Momentum, we have been in charge of the first intellectual output, as Alex said, which was the VET Guide to Data Skills Development. First of all, I don't have any interesting facts about football, as Jonathan had earlier, but I'm going to ask you to open a link which Alex has shared in the chat with you. So this is mentimeter.com, and I would like to see what skill you think is most important for an entrepreneur to have to be successful in their business. So if you would just go to mentimeter.com and enter the code 908457, which you can see on the screen as well. And I'll give you some time for this, and just to see exactly, maybe you want to think about it a little bit, but we will come back to this at the end of the presentation, and I'll share the results with you. Now, for a bit of context, which we worked on in this IO. So in today's digital world, the agility with which entrepreneurs employ information and communication technologies is essential to competitiveness. While digital communication skills have improved across the population generally, the ability to leverage information, especially data, is still underdeveloped. This is a lost opportunity. The volume of data that business owners have access to has grown exponentially, and if big data is turned into actionable smart data, it can drive productivity, innovation, and growth. The obstacle is that today's entrepreneurship teachers and trainers also face a data skills deficit. The objective of the guide we've produced is to raise awareness regarding the value of data skills for current and future entrepreneurs and increase knowledge of what contemporary data skills are and how they can be taught. This guide is aimed at vocational education training entrepreneurship teachers and trainers, but also at stakeholders, especially policymakers and investors in entrepreneurship education. For these reasons, it presents a comprehensive introduction to the role of data skills in VET and includes the following: the result of a data skills survey outlining the current skills and skills deficits of business trainers and advisors in participating countries, a review of the policy environment regarding data skills for entrepreneurs and data skills education at both EU and national and regional level, as well as an introduction to strategies for teaching data skills to entrepreneurs, including best practice examples and testimonies. The first section is the data skills needs of business trainers and advisors. And for this, we pulled together content from Ireland, Northern Ireland, Spain, the Netherlands, and Denmark. First of all, why should we conduct a needs analysis assessment? This is a systematic process for determining and addressing needs or gaps between current conditions and desired conditions or wants of a specific group. A needs assessment is a part of a planning process, often used for improvement in individuals, education, and training organizations or communities to help refine and improve a product such as training or service a client receives. Needs assessments can help improve the quality of policy or program decisions, thus leading to improvements in performance and the accomplishment of desired results. So the way we did our needs assessment is we put together an online survey, which was chosen as the method for conducting the study. We asked business advisors in Ireland, Northern Ireland, Spain, Netherlands, and Denmark to fill this out. And the reasons for this method were that it allows for a more diverse survey sample. A survey link was widely shared online. Also, online surveys are low cost, fast, and efficient. And project partners are linked to an extensive network of business advisors, trainers, and mentors, so ready-made participant list existed. An overview of dataset needs analysis survey. It was a 12-question survey. We had a 100% completion rate, and it was completed by 33 business advisors from the partner countries. In average, users spent 8 minutes and 16 seconds filling out the survey, which means that they took their time there and they actually put a lot of thought into their answers, which means we have a relevant study in our hands. Some key questions that we sought to be answered. How is the role of the business advisor evolving? Are data skills relevant and required? What are the top 5 data skills or data training topics that dataset should consider? What are the current data skills deficiencies of business advisors, and are business advisors aware of how they can apply data skills in their work to support, train, and mentor SMEs? After pulling together the answers, we had some interesting results. So data skills proficiency is quite low among business advisors, with only 21% of those surveyed feeling that their skills are proficient. The acquisition of data skills is of great importance to business advisors. 81% of those surveyed indicated that they would be interested in receiving, accessing free training and practical resources so that they could use them to teach entrepreneurs and small and medium business owners about applicable data skills to their businesses. Business advisors today favor a hands-on approach to providing business support. Therefore, our data set materials should be very practical in nature and be solution-oriented. We have identified 5 key areas where business advisors need upskilling with regard to digital skills, and also 5 key areas which are particularly relevant for SMEs, and these are ranked in order of importance in the table below. So for business advisors, the most important is information analysis. The second most important, reporting skills, followed by application of data to solve problems and inform business ideas, and then data collection and technical/digital skills. On the other hand, for business owners, the most important skill was the application of data to solve problems and inform business ideas, followed by communication skills, then information analysis, followed by creative thinking and digital skills. In the second section, we have a review of the policy environment regarding data skills for entrepreneurs and data. This is a big section in the guide. It is very interesting and very in-depth, so I recommend that you download the resource and really dive into this, because it really is very interesting, especially in this environment. So we found that in Northern Ireland, and the Netherlands, there are multiple programs, initiatives, and training schemes in place to encourage the uptake of data skills training. However, in Spain and Denmark, there appears to be a somewhat of a lag in this regard, but more headway and new developments are expected to happen soon. In the third section, we pulled together some strategies. We compiled a few strategies for teaching data skills to entrepreneurs. We found that best practice strategies used to teach data skills to entrepreneurs should fulfill the following criteria. They should be simple, repetitive, build on existing knowledge, and use applied learning. The proposed teaching strategies are action learning, individual coaching and mentoring, hackathons, project-based learning, and flipped learning. For action learning, the applicability of action learning has proved to be effective in the business world as well as in the educational sector. In the face of the 21st century challenges, implementation of action learning has expanded significantly in recent years. It develops collaborative skills, which are increasingly important in the digital age, as well as a recognition that lifelong learning is a skill necessary for professional development in a rapidly changing world. Action learning not only has a positive effect at administrative levels, but it can also have a positive impact on learning at the classroom-based training level. The second strategy is individual coaching and mentoring. The idea of personalization fits very well with the target group of dataset, as the focus is on development of capabilities for a particular entrepreneurship idea, which is in most cases closely linked to the interests and background of entrepreneurs. The idea of coaching and mentoring includes continuous self-assessment that is a typical role in business advisors that would be the trainer profile in dataset. Hackathons are a teaching method that has gained popularity mostly outside the classroom, while it can be integrated into the curriculum as well. A hackathon can be organized at the end of the training program for entrepreneurs, so participants can apply their knowledge towards a real-based knowledge. Of course, trainers who decide to use hackathons can tweak them to the needs of the entrepreneurs that they are training. Project-based learning is another teaching strategy that we identified. And this is based on the reason that having data skills and knowing what to do with data is not adequate for entrepreneurs and business owners to upgrade their business with data. Data science is only an instrument for making strategic decisions. However, entrepreneurs should also know how to acquire relevant data and how to utilize it as a response to their business needs. Therefore, any data science training program for entrepreneurs should not only be designed for teaching, analyzing the data, but also teaching how to seek for and collect relevant data for the key questions of businesses. Project-based learning approach may enable dataset trainers design an end-to-end learning experience for entrepreneurs. Flipped learning So flipped learning is a teaching strategy that is basically using resources which the trainer can teach in advance, and then meeting with the students, with the entrepreneurs that they are training, and discussing the materials. Basically, it's usually video, also different reading materials, which the trainers discuss with the trainees. It's a simple process, and it's driven by business advisors and the VET teachers and trainers. The videos used in the flipped classroom model enable learners to pause, rewind, and replay at their leisure. And it is also very useful for making complex topics more manageable and easier to digest. Some conclusions that we gathered in the guide. Data skills proficiency is quite low among business advisors, with only 21% of those surveyed feeling that their skills are proficient. The acquisition of data skills is of great importance to business advisors, with 81% of those surveyed indicating that they would be interested in receiving and accessing free training and or practical resources that they could use to teach entrepreneurs and small and medium enterprise owners about applicable data skills to their businesses. At the moment, the guide is available for download on the project website, which you can see on the screen right now. So it's dataset.eu, and it is available in English, Spanish, and Danish. Now, let us see what our Mentimeter says here. So we have quite a few answers. Thank you so much for that. So it appears that 44 attendees have voted here, and the most important seems to be communication skills. The second most important is data information and analysis, and we're getting more votes at the moment, followed by creative thinking, and only 2 people checked technical and digital skills. This survey will be open for a few more hours, so we would really love to see more of your input on this. Thank you so much. Alex, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for sharing the results of the intellectual outputs of the initial survey. That has greatly informed our next intellectual output as well. But also thank you very much for an engaging exercise with Mentimeter. I want to remind all the attendees what Sonia have just mentioned, that it will be open for another couple of hours, and we would really love to have some more results from you and have a bit more of comparison with our initial results too. But I thank you all for doing that. If you want to find the number that you need to put to www.menti.com, it's up there, and I'm going to post it here in the chat once again. Here it is. So fantastic. That was a great presentation by Sonia of the intellectual output that also set some foundation to the next intellectual output of the dataset project, the dataset curriculum and open educational resources. The resources were created by the team from University of Alcalá, led by Miguel Ángel. And I would like to invite Miguel Ángel to share this exciting presentation of his and yeah, teach us a little bit more about the data skills development curriculum.
Many thanks, Alexandra. Give me a second to share my slides, which I think you should be seeing right now. Okay. Can you see the slides? Yeah. Okay, so thanks to all of you for being here. My task now is to start with the specifics of the outcomes in terms of teaching guidance in this project. And okay, I'm not saying anything about the consortium because it has been already presented, but an important thing is that everything that we are saying is both applicable to entrepreneurs or to intrapreneurs, so also to projects that are internal to an organization. And as you know, it could be some kind of data-related innovation inside a company. So it's not necessarily only for the typical startup that is just starting. So before starting, I just wanted to say some words about the problems that I have experienced with during many years, because you know I'm an academic, I'm full professor at the university, but I'm also a mentor of startups in one of the biggest business schools here in Madrid, and I have some experience also in creating companies, not as a full-time entrepreneur, but I have some experience on that, and I wanted to show you a bit of the motivation of the teaching materials and the teaching approach. And it is not me who is now speaking, it's my colleague Rafael that you have there in the picture. And you can find this text together with the full interview in the web page of Dataset. So I invite you to later go and give a look at the full interview. But I just took some highlights from what Rafael, who is a real entrepreneur in data, said to us. And the first thing is that, you know, something that we knew and that Sonia has been telling us with the report of that study, but some entrepreneurs doesn't really know about the underlying technologies, underlying ways of getting value from data, all this kind of stuff. And Rafael says that the most important thing is that we have to teach them about the processes and the pipeline. So something like the methods they have to follow to really understand how data is fitting with their project. And also, and that's very important, to have a notion and an understanding of the services of the cloud. Because at the end, most data projects ends up with hiring some services in the cloud, and you need to know something about the cost. And of course, if these costs fit your business model or not. So that's not about teaching math. This is not about teaching programming. It's something about giving some extra input to the regular process of mentoring of entrepreneurs. And the second important question that we discuss very much inside the project is, are these data skills the same for every business? And okay, the clear answer is no, because it really depends on the kind of business model, the need to scale for big data, because not in every case you need to scale to what we usually call big data. Also, depending on the reliance on external data acquisition, which brings some regulatory or even ethical issues, and also the role of artificial intelligence in the business value proposition, which could be more central or be, let's say, more lateral or secondary in a sense. And just as an illustration, I just wanted to put this picture here of Foreman. Foreman is the CDO of one of the largest email marketing companies in the CDO, Chief Data Officer of one of the largest email marketing companies in the world. And I put his book here just for the case that you want to take a look, because he's teaching data science, but not with Python, R, or any of these programming languages. But his approach is teaching this data science with Microsoft Excel, which is and the same topics can be taught with Microsoft Excel because the concepts are the same. So the tool should not be a problem, and that's the approach we took in this project. So just to understand you, just to explain a bit the positioning of the deliverable, I'm speaking about IO2. Sonia has been speaking about IO1. So we took all the conclusions from IO1 and tried to, especially taking into account the pedagogical approach, as you will see, we tried to select the right approach based on that previous work. And then after that, IO3, you can think on IO3 as an instantiation of the curriculum, but you should be aware that the curriculum is something like a framework that you have to tailor to your specific needs. And one specific needs, a specific situation could be pure online education, but that's not the typical approach. The typical approach is that you are sitting in an incubator with the entrepreneurs, or the mentors are working with them in the regular fashion, using the regular tools, and then you make use of the resources in the curriculum to enhance, in a sense, your mentoring process. So that's for you to understand that this curriculum, or what IO2 provides, is something like a guide that you have to tailor to your specific needs, be them more complex, simpler, or whatever. Okay. Okay, fine. Then the first important thing is, if the pedagogical approach could be active learning, it could be project-based learning, as Sonia said, and we are addressing entrepreneurs, it was kind of obvious that we should start with the typical approach to teaching entrepreneurship, which nowadays is basically the business model canvas. Linear startup approach, business model canvas is some kind of ubiquitous all around the world. And probably all of you have heard about the linear startup and even created one of these single page models of a business, as you can see here in the image. And then we started our approach from here, saying, okay, which are the difficulties that the entrepreneurs find in creating this canvas when their model entails data in one way or another. And to be more specific, here you have numbers in each of the sections. And what we did is to try to go through each of these sections and try to find out where were the problems. And just to give you an overview, because that's in the document that you can, of course, read afterwards. The first important thing is in section 4, is data really a key component to solve the problems of your customers? That's the first thing that you have to question about your business model. That's the motivation. The second is about I will start with the 3 and 5, but which is the position of data in your business model? Is data a source of value, like in 3? Is in some cases data a source of unfair or competitive advantage, like in section 5? So you have to very, very well identify why data, where your problem is concerned with data and with data analysis, because okay, that's the focus. And maybe not every project fits into this problem set. And then entrepreneurs find very, very difficult when they are dealing with these technologies to fill section 7. And section 7 is about cost structure. And especially if the project needs to be scalable, it's very difficult to make some cost estimates that are a bit realistic in a sense. And this is why we are providing also for those who need that some guidelines on how to help entrepreneurs to make sensible guesses about the cost structure and feasibility in terms of, you know, the return of investment in the technical IT infrastructure. So that's an overall viewpoint of the thing, and then that's the steps and the modules. And maybe I could stop here and finish my presentation by describing this diagram, because that's something like the roadmap that we have devised. I will give you first a very quick overview of this, and then in the rest of my talk, I will go one by one, just giving you some highlights of what we propose in each of these steps in the process. So if we look at the diagram, we are starting with, okay, entrepreneurs that have some kind of pre-knowledge. They need to be proficient in regular digital skills. That's something like a prerequisite for any, I think for everybody nowadays. And the second important thing that is outside of the curriculum is this phase 1, which is no other thing than creating a business model canvas. And maybe some students already have done a business model canvas for the projected ideas or something like that. Or in other cases, maybe it's the mentor who is proposing a business model canvas just for exercising purposes. It doesn't matter, but you have to start from a regular canvas, the one that are usually produced in business schools and incubators. Just after that is when the curricular recommendations start, and everything is basically a refinement of the canvas. It's no other thing than taking the initial canvas and try to make it a better canvas at the end. And on the right, you have the modules. First, you have to think of the value of data. Then you have to think of the kinds of data and difficulties associated to the kinds of data for your business. Then you have to enter into what are analytics, which are the processes involved in analytics, and how you can understand what data scientists do. So it's not that you will become a data scientist, which is something that would require formal education, but that you understand how a data scientists think and which are the kind of things that they are doing. And you can see that these are fulfilled by a data canvas and then an analytic canvas. Probably you need the first one, probably you need that. The second one, maybe some people need it. Maybe some people think that it's that the model are so simple that maybe not useful in this case, in some cases. And then phase 4 is when you understand your data and value of data, you understand your analytic processes. Then you have to move to implementation, basically translating that into money and restrictions. And then here you have something like a split. You see that in the left, we are dealing with data ethics and regulation. This topic is becoming more and more important, especially if you are dealing with data from people, or your system is taking decisions that affect people, which is basically almost any project, except if they are industrial or something like that. And you have to take that very much in account. Just for the case you don't know, there is a high-level expert group in the European Commission that is about trustworthy artificial intelligence. So that's a hot topic right now, and probably you have to at least consider that in your model canvas at some point. And then on the right, you see that we turn attention to other things that are maybe more techy, more IT, and it's about data infrastructure. Here is where the cloud thing comes into the scene. So you have to need to know not the technical aspects of the technology, but the service aspects of the technology, because you have to understand what these data providers are offering you and why some of their services are cheaper or more expensive than others. And finally, with that, hopefully you will be able to do a more accurate or more realistic data cost modeling. And that's basically the thing. That's the framework. And the idea is that the mentor or the teacher or the trainer have to have this set of pieces, and then you can combine, take maybe some part of them, and that's very contextual. And the project-based learning is implied here because the model canvas and the iterations, eventual pivoting, or getting data from customers, all this kind of stuff is some sort of project, if you understand that, because you have some planning and you have to do that with some mentoring. So this is why this pedagogy is fitting well with this proposal. Okay, so that's the overview, and now I will go quickly because I don't want to give you a lot of details that maybe are not interesting, and you can find that in the document. But just to give you some highlights of each of these modules and examples of the products that the outcomes of each of the phases. So in phase one, remember that's a regular business model canvas, and here you have this picture. Usually this is done maybe on a blackboard or something like that, or in paper or whatever. And that's no different from a regular business model canvas. The only thing is that, of course, there should be a business model based on data in some way. And that's something that the tutor needs to be aware of. So not every business proposal may fit this kind of education. So starting with the specifics, module one is about the value of data, and that's basically a motivational introduction. So the students comes with their canvas, and then based on the sectors or domains of the canvas of the students, or maybe on other related cases. So for example, if the students are have a business proposals in the field of tourism, then maybe the instructor can get some business case from another tech startup or whatever that is already mature, and bring the experience in to understand why the value comes from the data. This is why that's basically case-based learning or storytelling maybe. And the important thing here is to understand the uncertainty associated with the cost structure, which is a major thing here. So that's basically something like preparation to understand why the rest of the phases are important and should be conducted. So section 2 is very, very different because it's data in context. And here basically we have to take the business model canvas, focus on key resources, Data should be there in some way, and the idea is to classify on the kinds of data. And this classification is very important because some business models maybe stop here because it's impossible, or have some kind of regulatory problems with getting the data that the entrepreneur wants to take, or maybe this is too risky or create some kind of dependency on external sources. So this is looking at the data, who owns the data, how to get the data, is the data enough to the offering to the customer, or maybe not. That's something which is really important and should be made very clear here. Just to give you an example of the tools to use here you have a data canvas, but this is not the data canvas because there are several that you can find as open educational resources in the internet, or you can even craft your own data canvas, combining several of them, but that's just an example. In which, for example, here there's a difference of internal versus external, a difference left to right of rotational versus continuous or streaming. So these are the typical kind of things that you have to think on at this point. So for example, if you are dealing with external data, you have to question who is the owner, which are the means. And in some cases, you would find that getting this data, for example, by scrapping websites or getting external data, creates a key critical dependence on your business, which make it fragile, and maybe you have to rethink. And this is how, for example, something that looks technical is not really technical. It's that you have to enter into the consideration of the feasibility of getting data of enough quality. And that's just an example. Once you have understood the kinds of data, ownership, means of acquiring, then when the machine learning enter into a scene. I say machine learning, but it could be any other kind of more traditional analytics or specific analytics. But in general, most of the projects require some form of machine learning. In some cases, you have to buy this machine learning to somebody that is a provider. In some cases, you have to craft the machine learning, the prediction models, for example, inside your business. But in both cases, you have then to reflect on the work of the data scientist, what you will do with the data, and which are the business criteria to validate that model. Because, for example, if you want to make an application for, I don't know, predicting something on the internet, predicting customer behavior in some way, you need, when you create artificial intelligence or machine learning models, not the entrepreneur, but the expert, they need some sort of business metric. Why? Because there are, in machine learning or artificial intelligence, there are no good or bad models in general. There are good or bad models for a particular purpose. And this is called profile-driven analytics, which means that, okay, you are doing a technical thing, which is training artificial intelligence models with algorithms, and this is very techy and very difficult to understand and to master. But at the end, the evaluation of that models depend on the cost of the error or the cost of the success of in the prediction of that model. And in many cases, for example, making errors in one or another direction have different costs. It's not the same if you are, for example, speaking of a churn prediction model in telecommunications or something like that. The cost structure of false positive and false negative are very different. And then this drives your search for the model. And that's a business thing. That's not a technical thing. But they are intertwined in some way. So it's very difficult to understand one without knowing what you are doing in the other side. So in this case, the approach, and this is something that I have practiced for many years, because I have been teaching machine learning for executives, for directors of medium and large companies. And you can teach basics of machine learning just with graphical user interfaces. So no math, no coding, just understanding the intuition of what is being done. And that's an example with a platform, BigML, that you can enter. There are many others with nice user interfaces. And with a degree of guidance, you can understand what's, for example, this thing that is a decision tree for a charm problem. And then you can explain what's happening here, what's the training, what's the evaluation. So the main numbers. And in a few hours, the people with just the understanding of the business can have an idea of how much effort would it require to come up with these models, and also with the uncertainty of getting models, because most of the people think that data science is something like regular software engineering, but it is not. It's a big process of trial and error, okay? And then in many cases, the problem is that you are something like trying to find by trial and error a good model, and you are constrained by some initial budget. And then maybe you have to give up trying to find a good model just because you ran out of money for your experiments. And that's also very, very important to understand. That's not regular software engineering. That's trial and error. And that's, in some cases, if you are using big data, you have to pay a bill to Amazon, to Google, or to one of these cloud providers. Okay, so that's the analytic thing. This, just to show you how these topics can get into the canvas. Here you have an example. I'm not going into the details, but some of the knowledge of the previous tool can be translated again into a canvas, which is a mix of the value proposition plus some of the processes that you can do with that tools. That's an analytic canvas. There are also several of these proposals available in the internet. Okay. So, okay, at this point, you understand the value, you understand the processes, you understand the data, you understand the kind of data science tasks that will be done, but now it's time to look in more detail to the cost and also to the constraints, because as I already told you, there are limits that maybe are barriers to creating your model. Essentially, important barriers are data protection regulation. That's a very important thing. The second is risk assessment and cybersecurity. So, for example, if some of the models are put on the internet, then some bad guys could try to do some kind of adversarial approach to fake your models. That's something that you need to know. So there's people that if you put online a machine learning system, they would try to find those instances in which your model fails to predict well, and that could also be a problem because it could corrupt your model in a sense. Okay. And also, in general, fundamentals of data ethics, so that your model is fair, is not biased against some part of the population. All this kind of stuff that is very much in the European agenda right now should be considered here. Maybe not regulation, only ethics, maybe both. It is very much depends on the kind of application. And here, entrepreneurs, of course, should have some knowledge of regulation. But there are also some specific of bias in algorithms, for example, that could be included here. If you look in the internet, you will see that there have been cases of bias in the machine learning against some minorities or something like that. And this is the point in which you have to bring this to the table and maybe decide that you can do it. You can continue with your model, or that you have to take some precautions to avoid this kind of unwanted effects. Okay. Again, okay, there are canvases for that. Maybe there is not something like a canvas that is fit for all purposes. But okay, here you have a data ethics canvas, for example, that is an open educational resource. And here, if you take a look here, you have to evaluate the impact on people, how your user will engage with the model, how are you going to communicate of the threats or of the problems of the model. So that's in the sphere of the interaction and the respect to the users or other people that could be affected by the decisions of your artificial intelligence or analytic models. And of course, here you have all the regulatory thing. Okay, that's something like another canvas in the stack of canvases right now. And then going to the more infrastructure related thing, and this is where there are no canvases. Okay, this is the only place that is not driven by a canvas. The module 5 is about choosing the right platform. Choosing the right platform, because if you, for example, decide to go with Microsoft Azure or with Google Cloud Computing or Amazon services, then you have something like a catalog of services. Okay, these services have a cost that you have to understand. This cost depends on the volume of data. Hopefully, you know something about the volume of data because you already analyzed your data in a previous step. So you can do some educated estimations right now. And the idea is that you learn about these technologies, but not about the internals, but about the level of service that they are giving to you and the cost related to that service. That's the key thing, because there are so many technologies that it's very easy to get lost and to assume that you can use the same infrastructure for that than the one you are using for your web pages. And that's not the same at all. In some cases, you require some kind of service that is specialized for some particular kind of queries or predictions or users. It varies a lot. And you need to have something like an idea of the cost associated before you hire the technical staff to do the architecture and to do the technical deployment. I know that this could look something like pretty daunting for somebody, you know. But at the end, for example, at the end of the day, if you go for one of the certifications, basic certifications, for example, in Microsoft Azure, which okay, I'm not certified Microsoft engineer, but I know about the certifications, and the basic one, for example, I think that's not for computer scientists. It's not for IT people. It's for everybody that more or less understands what are cloud services, and everybody that understands the infrastructure of I don't know, needed to deploy a web page or something like that, which doesn't need to be a computer scientist, can more or less understand the offering of Azure at that level. Okay, and in addition to that, is where the specifics comes, because in some cases, for example, if the business model is based, for example, in image processing or in speech to text or some of kind of video detection, all this kind of stuff, this is dominated nowadays by deep learning. And in deep learning, there are, for example, specialized hardware, which is these GPUs that maybe you have heard about. And then you have to plan for hiring these GPUs or having them at home if your project fits into that very specialized category. And that's something that is a bit more difficult to find out, but that comes at the end. And maybe if the project is basic on the kinds of data or is more traditional in the analytic needs, you can simply skip this part, and because it's not needed at all. But if you are dealing with that, you have to enter into that, and you have to know also about the offering of machine learning on the cloud. And I have put you here this this link which is called PAPIs, is Prediction APIs, which is basically a conference in which all the vendors of analytics in the cloud showcase their products. That's for business owners. That's not basically for IT people. Okay. So that's more or less the overview. And when you know that things, this is where you can think about your cost structure, because you know what you will need. And then it's something like you can come back to your original canvas and refine your original canvas and say, okay, these were my initial estimations of the thing, but maybe now I know much more about the kinds of data, ownership of data. I know about what data I can collect or not. I know about the services that I will need to use broadly. I know the approximate cost of that, and then I can make something like a better cost estimation and have a much better business model canvas from the viewpoint of asking money or asking for funding to some investor, business angel, or whatever, or public call. Take into account that this kind of data costing at the end, it boils down to having the right skill level for using this kind of pricing calculators that I invite you to test. So all the big cloud providers have calculators. You enter here and you say which kind of traffic or data will you need to process, which are the volumes, etc., etc. Some are harder to use, some are easier to use, and with the years they are becoming more user-friendly. At the beginning they were very difficult to understand because much was assumed that, of your knowledge of the infrastructure, but with some guidance you can come here to one of these calculators and then make something that is based on more informed assumptions. Okay, and that's basically the thing. Okay, that's how we come back to the thing. So just to sum up, the curriculum and the OER are just a set of guidelines. The set of guidelines is, let's say, summarized in this diagram that I showed at the beginning. As you can see, there are a lot of things to consider in each of the steps, and you can take parts of that. And the aim is refining your initial canvas with your mentor. That's basically is as simple and as difficult as that. So that's basically the thing. And that's all from my presentation. So Alexandra, I don't know if you want to take the floor now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Miguel Angel, for highlighting and navigating us through this dataset curriculum or the guidelines, as you say, step by step, and providing some excellent examples as well, and taking time to explain us every step on the way. This curriculum is, by the way, available online on our website, and please take a look at the chat. We have shared the link there with you, and you can dive into it and look at it in more details. And I also want to mention that all the questions that you have for Miguel Angel, you can ask them in the Q&A using the Q&A button, and we will address your questions after several more presentations from the guest speakers. We want to have a discussion panel where we address all of the questions to all of the speakers. So please don't forget to submit your questions through Q&A. So to build on that, now we would like to move maybe a bit closer to the real life, let's say, and to introduce you our guest speakers who have practical experiences. They all serve both as life examples of entrepreneurs themselves and business owners, but also business trainers and educators who have insights into data and data skills training to some extent, and they all have very different stories to tell, but we will definitely be able to discuss these insights in the discussion after their presentations. So we have 3 guest speakers I've mentioned. We have mentioned them actually several times, and I would just like to dive in right now and introduce once again our first guest speaker. It is Alfred Utku. He is the founder of European Leadership University, but he is also the president and senior partner of Management Center Turkey. And he is himself an esteemed business mentor and turned educator with even the best-selling book in Turkey, Agile Companies. He's joining us right now to give a talk about his perspective on data skills training and also from the perspective of the European Leadership University. Thank you very much, Alper, for joining us today. And
you,
I would like to give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. So just wanted to check, is my voice clear for everyone?
Yes, it's excellent.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, thank you, Miguel and Alexandra. Thank you for the introduction. Let me do a quick introductions. We are European Leadership University, a new generation university developing tech talent for the digital era, and one of our flagship programs are on data science. We have a Masters of Data Science, which reskills, upskills global talent, and then brings them to progressive companies in Europe to be employed as data scientists or machine learning engineer. In that sense, we work 2 ways with the individual talent around the world: software engineers, software developers, computer scientists, or even people from business to reskill. But on the other side, we work with companies who are looking at data-driven practices, who are looking at data-driven capabilities into their organizations. So I will be sharing our experience last couple of years with them. We work with large and small-sized companies, and our focus is entrepreneurship. So and this will be my angle. And then in that sense, one of the biggest learning for us has been in last few years, both in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, like Middle East as well, is the maturity of the organizations we work with in terms of being ready for data, to be data-driven, and to go even beyond data to bring artificial intelligence or AI practices into that. And this maturity, I hate to make generalizations, but I think there's, at the moment, this maturity is quite low if I look overall, and there seems to be a divide and gap between, sometimes, like I see that gap sometimes between what we do, like doing machine learning programs and data science programs and developing data scientists, and at the same time the existing practices in organizations. So in that sense, so my presentation will be actually really rewinding back, taking 1 or 2 steps further to understand the need of data skills in the organizations that we run and we lead and we manage, but also some practical ways to bring them from a much more common level of maturity. So, and please feel free to have questions at any moment. So one of the reasons that we use data in our businesses, and I speak not only as an academic entrepreneur, but I'm also speaking as as someone who's been an entrepreneur last 30 years. So please hear me from that perspective. So the way I encourage my team to bring data skills is simply to enable the fast growth of our business. And this is the fuel for us that enables us to do twice the work in half the time with the practices, which I could also call the agile practices, that helps us the growth of the company. And I'm sure you've heard a million times the VUCA, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And when we work with organizations as the university, one of the things that we want to bring to the organization is to bring down what is missing in the age of VUCA. So instead of volatility, how can we bring stability? Instead of uncertainty, how can we bring clarity? And how can we turn complexity into simplicity? And in the world of ambiguity, how can we find direction? I think data skills. When I speak with the leaders, the founders, I think the data skills are helping them and helping us to bring that stability, clarity, simplicity, and direction. And also when we have these four, what's the output in the organization that we see? As we talked about speed, doing the twice the work in half the time, the simplicity, because sometimes the complex things scare people. You know, one of my mentors would always tell to me, you know, we are the enemy of what we don't know. So when we see something complex, we become foreign to it, and we scare and we try to stick to what we are used to, and then we cannot bring new things. One of the other things about the data skills is it brings direction, it creates collaboration in the organizations. So everybody is on the same page. You know, they are talking the same language, and I think it creates, because of that, it creates transparency. That's I think it's a very important value today for the speed, and it all leads to a growth mindset. This is why we are doing all of that. We're not doing it for academic purposes, research purposes. We want to grow our organizations. We want to have value for our customers, and we use these outcomes. Actually, we present these outcomes when we do culture projects with clients. We present these outcomes actually as living values, and then we always, and when we have when we are not sure about anything, when we implement a data project or something, we always go back to these 5 values. Of course, every organization have their own values. Sometimes some organizations can be very bureaucratic, and we learn to appreciate bureaucracy as a value as well, rather than trying to impose our values. But I think these are the set of values I always tell to my clients that helps us to grow our business, and that we believe that will help you to grow your business as well. And when we have these values, I think you start to bring in new agile practices, which are happening around cross-functional empowered teams. They are these teams. They have short weekly review meetings. They have weekly progress. They have manageable projects. So what does these have to do? What does that kind of outcomes have to do with data skills? Well, for example, when we do weekly review meetings, we have sometimes reviews like maximum like 30 minutes, 15 minutes for whatever the actions we're taking. And when we have data skills and data, the right data in front of our fingertips, we don't have to do long reporting and long things, because everybody comes informed with the transparency and with the sharing. And then we move very fast. When we need to make decisions, we don't have to do long discussions. We have the data on our fingertips, and then we can make these meetings quite effective and quite short. So that is, I think, if there's only one thing that I would convince to anybody, again, I go back to speed, and speed which happens through collaboration, that the growth of the business is not in the only hands of the entrepreneur. That's also another big problem, because as entrepreneurs, one of our biggest challenge is the growth depends on us. We are leading everything, but we are also the bottleneck in the company. And when we have the data and data skills in the organization, all of a sudden the growth of the company can be much more diversified by different members of the organization because they are empowered. So, and in that sense, Miguel, gave the curriculum, and the curriculum gives us lots of skills to do that. But when we do these, we have certain principles about using data and working with analytics. For example, we moved away from colossal platforms and enterprise resource systems like the large mega platforms, and we are migrating more and more into microservices or micro apps when we work with data, which can speak to each other. And they can also, the reason why we use them is the next two principles. We want to have the data skills in the organization as an internal capability. So we want to avoid as much as we can the need for external coders or external developers or designers or analysts. We want to do everything possible in-house. This brings us speed, this brings us cost efficiency, this brings us visibility, transparency, collaboration. And so because of that internal capability, we use micro apps rather, moved to micro apps rather than enterprise systems. Yes, if you have large enterprise systems, that's fine, but we used to have one of them. We now, last couple of years in our organization as well, done the same. The impact and the speed changes dramatically. The other thing is we also don't do mega projects when we do things because of the agile principles. And the mega projects are, instead of mega projects, we do bite-sized projects. Because of these bite-sized projects, whatever that is, that can be that can be some kind of a development, that can be a product, it can be a process, that can be a business development effort, whatever it is. But these, because of the bite-sized projects, then we can have regular weekly meetings, short meetings, which is actually, as I said before, fueled by the data in the organization. And so if any project needs a Gantt chart, which it may, we look at it like 2 times, 3 times, really, if we really want to do that project, or if we can kind of cut it down to small things, because then the impact of the fast data is much less in these kind of projects. And I think before I move to maybe the questions either from you, Alexander, or from the group, what I have in terms of what to go from here. I think one of the things in the organizations when we bring down the data skills, it's a part of a broader focus as being future ready, future skills focused. So data skills is, I think in today's world, is an inevitable part of the new, let's say, manager, new worker. But one of the biggest skill that fuels the data skills is the learning agility. I think this for me is almost like a super skill, because there's always something new coming up. And that new is sometimes scary, sometimes looks complicated. Sometimes we think, oh, I'm not made for this, I'm that, I'm this, I studied that, I don't know that, this is for coders. But I think having the core learning agility is having the courage and action-driven mindset to learn new things, to try new things, to experiment new things. And we always talk about the future, and we're reading about whether the robots will take our jobs. We are worried about artificial intelligence. I hear this in lots of companies or forums. But my conclusion during our last couple of years' work is much simpler. I think as long as we have the agility for future skills, I don't think there is any worry for anyone to lose their job. But when people who will lose their jobs are the people who will not know to interact with data and machines. I think this is the future. So whoever will replace my job in the future, if I'm going to be replaced, is someone who can work with machines, work with data. Because in 1900s, like in the beginning of this century with the Industrial Revolution, we had the combination of worker and the manager. And today, what the typical worker is used to do in the last 100 years, let's say, is replaced by machines and algorithms. And so who is the next manager? I think I see the next manager as the data scientist. And one of the things when I speak with our data science students, they ask us, what's going to happen to our role, to our, next 5 years. And one of the first things I tell them, your title will disappear in 5 years. There will not be any data scientist in 5 years. And they're like looking at me, why? I mean, why are we studying then? I say, no, data scientist will be so common that the future finance manager, the future marketing manager, future purchasing manager, future any manager will have to be a data scientist. So in that sense, I tell them the data science learning is the next MBA in the context that worker-manager duality is replaced with the algorithm data scientist. So because of that change, which is happening very fast, I think the initial step that we can bring into our organizations is starting with this learning agility, fueled with these values that I have shared before: the speed, simplicity, collaboration, transparency, and growth mindset. To start from one point, with the courage and with the action-driven approach, with the growth mindset. So that is, I think, where I would like to pause, Alexandra. And if there are any questions, I think we have like 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Alper, for your inspirational speech and future-oriented speech. It's very interesting to see your perspectives, and especially you bringing up the point or idea of data science being a new MBA soon. I'm curious to see what others would have to say about that later on in the discussion panel. And I would like to mention also for you, Alper, and for other speakers, and of course for our attendees, first and foremost, that we'll have a discussion after all 3 presentations. Please, if you have questions to Alper, and I imagine you might have quite a number, please do not hesitate to post them in the Q&A, and we will try to get them asked and answered as well. Thank you. So shall we move on? Yes, let's do that. And let's introduce our next guest speaker, Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie is a training industry expert and the CEO of Yoru Software Solutions. But she is also the one who won Google Adopt a Startup award for her platform, Veri. I hope I pronounced it correctly. This platform digitalizes mandatory, or helps to digitalize mandatory compliance paperwork, and also utilizes data. And I believe Anne-Marie will be able to tell us a little bit more about it too. So Anne-Marie, we are extremely excited to hear from you and to hear your insights and your experiences.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Anne-Marie McSorley, and I'm speaking to you from our office in Kilkenny in Ireland. Delighted to have so many people on the call. And I'm just going to start today by just showing you something here on my desk. Just loads and loads and loads of paper files, because I have been working in education and training for the last 20 years, and always the bane of my life was the amount of paperwork involved in the delivery of these programs. Now, I had looked at learning management systems and I had looked at CRMs, but the data that I required for auditing these programs was never available. So I'm going to start my presentation now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey, and hopefully you'll enjoy the session. So just give me a second. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, so the first thing to say is, after Miguel and the other presenters today, I'm definitely not a data scientist. I'm a long way from that. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Very. Very stands for verification, and we digitize training compliance. So we're a data company. As I said, really, my children used to say that I wasn't able to program the Sky remote for the television. So I'm not a person that has a data background, but 5 years on from when the initial idea came to me, we are now a Google award-winning company with 12 staff, and we live in beautiful Kilkenny here. We have an office. People are working remotely from Amsterdam, from South Africa. We have a fantastic Belarusian girl that manages our operations. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the journey to start with. Let me see, 4 years ago when I got the idea, our organization in Ireland, Enterprise Ireland, supported me bringing the idea into a business model. And at that stage, I had a niece who's a data scientist, and she was looking to move into consultancy. So she and I worked for a couple of months on the vision forward of what we were going to do. And she did some data analysis around the stuff that I was currently gathering in paper. And that was enough really for me to have an overview to go and build a beta, because obviously we needed to be able to capture the data, then we needed to make sure it was clean, then we need to analyze it, and then we needed to view it. So really, I think that was done in return for her learning about moving from being a researcher into working in business. And I used to I gave her free accommodation and free food. So it's amazing what you can do in a short space of time. So the following year, once I had my beta up and I'd sold it, first client in Ireland was the Irish Red Cross. Again, it was really around the fact that they had so much compliance data required around training, and they had no way of visualizing it. We won Google Adopt a Startup here in Ireland, and that was a massive boost for us, and it enabled us to win we won 110,000 euros worth of Google product, but that year we won another 50,000 euros worth of actual money, which allowed me to hire my first technologist. And he had at that time had been helping me build the platform from scratch. So those two kickoffs were fantastic for us, and the following year, as with any startup, we were going up and down and up and down, but the product was getting better, and our clients, I believe hugely in design partnership. And even though you might have a fantastic concept, you need to listen to what your clients want, because initially when I was modeling the data, I had a completely different vision of what I was going to supply to my clients. But once I started working with them, I realized that the requirement was something a little different. So in 2018, we met a new client that had 22,000 days of training throughout Ireland, and they had a massive problem. And we, with them, won the Irish Institute of Training and Development Best Consultancy Project. And again, we were against Aldi and Ulster Bank in Ireland. So we were at the time a 5-person show operating against, in a national competition against a huge organization, and we won that prize as well. So the journey has been great. I'm going to tell you a little bit now more about our clients and their pains. So the data around quality systems, anybody that works in IT knows that you have to have either an ISO accreditation, or you have to have some kind of a quality system to track what you do. But in our training business, those quality systems were all kept on paper. So policies, procedures, on data sets like attendance, certification, feedbacks, all of these were being kept in bundles and bundles of paper. Then in terms of time and people's progression, again, nobody had overview when a large program was being rolled out, because fine if it's an online program, but even in the COVID arena now, we see a huge amount of programs going to remote face-to-face learning. And although Zoom and other technologies are excellent, they don't extract the data that we require. Even a lot of these contracts would have upwards of 100 delivery agents, so tutors, mentors, and they would all be delivering out the same program. But again, ensuring that they are data compliant, data protection compliant, and that we have all their credentials as well as the credentials of the candidates. And the candidates then, if they want to come back and do another program, that they don't have to do another set. So one record, one candidate. So that's what we do. We gather, so we work with EU programs like Peace and Reconciliation in Northern Ireland. We also work with education. We work with the public sector. We have some COVID response programs, 3 COVID response programs for mentoring in finance, digital, and health and safety at the moment. So we see that this compliance requirement is huge. So as I said earlier, you saw the 3 folders on my desk. We really believe that the data is critical to our client. And it's in 3 ways, really. These slides show you the types of data, but the 3 things that we do for our clients is that we help them win new business. They win new business because within every public sector contract, data management is required, and transparency and quality assurance normally are to the value of about 40% of the contract. So by having data and full transparency, you can get a much higher grade on that. So we help our clients win business. Secondly, we reduce the duplication. So you can imagine for every time a person starts a day and they have to put in their name and they have to put in, and these names aren't always correct, and then they have to put in the date and those dates aren't always correct. So we provide 40% of a cost saving in terms of the administration of programs. So what took somebody before, maybe 2 people to administer a program, now they're doing it with half a person. And again, it was alluded to earlier on. I think Miguel was talking about NoSQL for Dummies and Spark for Dummies. So I've been reading all those kind of books, and our system allows the companies that are delivering this spend their time in ensuring the education is good rather than moving the pieces of paper around the table. So in the last year, we wanted to move to analytics and artificial intelligence, and we felt that the best way to do that was to create a something that was easy to start with. And the advice I'd been given was Likert scale is a really nice, clean set of data in terms of on a scale of 1 to 5, and where are you with? And within education or any of these programs, diagnostics initially to see where the people were. So competency assessment is very important. And then assessment at the end to see how people have the distance that they have traveled over the period. So we're very excited really to have a distance travel tool now that will show a candidate or a group of candidates how, under a number of indicators, how a candidate has traveled. So effectively, a mentor can assess their, say, their key work skills, their attitudinal skills, their timekeeping skills. But then they have other indicators like, did they attend all, did they submit their assignments? And then they have self-evaluation. And all of these metrics come in to a set of data that can be looked at for an individual, or for a mentor, or for a region, or for a course type, or over a full program. So you're getting really in-depth information that allows you. The third thing that we do for our clients is really turn their compliance data into intelligence. So I suppose that's what we do. But what I'd like to bring in terms of conversation to the group of entrepreneurs that are out there is that, you know, when I saw this and when I knew that I could do this, or I knew that I could at least try to do this, I thought everybody else was stupid, because why did they not believe me? They kept filling out their pieces of paper. They kept spending their time doing this, and yet the value proposition and the business case is really, really strong. So, you know, I'm 50 this year, and you know, I have won Google and stuff with 25-year-old nerdy tech guys. And my point is that it's very easy to come up with a great idea, and being disruptive is a fantastic philosophy, but you actually have to get a product market fit for your data disruption. And, you know, the one thing that I can say is that my customers at the beginning, the only people that like to be changed are babies, and they still cry throughout this process. So a lot of people don't enjoy change. So to bring a digitization to a company is a big change piece. And for that reason, we have started working with change management specialists. There's a fantastic company in Ireland called Softco, and she's a female CEO and huge company now, really successful. But one of the things that she said, and it really resonated with me, was that when she figured out that she wasn't in the game of educating people how to digitize, that she was actually in the game of supplying people that were ready to digitize, then her business took off. So really, from the point of view of you as an entrepreneur and you bringing a data product to market, it's very important that you find these people in this early stage, the innovators, the champions, the people that will see your vision. Because if they don't see that, you will get murdered in this area, because everybody will think it's brilliant, and everybody will want you to keep coming back and present it to the boards and telling you how brilliant you are at doing this fantastic thing, but they won't take the pain and spend the money of the change. So what you really need to do when you are working in a data-driven startup is find those innovators, design with those innovators, go into partnership with those really brave people, and then they're the people that will keep you alive. And it's hard to stay alive. I mean, other than we've had an investment of over $500,000 now and to grow, but to stay alive, you need to work with this innovative cohort. And, you know, investment in their innovative thinking is really, really important. The other thing to say is that COVID has actually probably pushed a lot of the people that were in here back in here, So within the 3 or 4 months of COVID, we have had maybe 4 or 5 new programs in the public sector that just wouldn't have happened because COVID happened and everybody was pushed back into their houses and they had to work remotely and they couldn't fill in the paperwork. They needed a tool in order for them to use it. So we now are reaping a little of that reward. But that didn't make it any easier. It actually probably made it to a certain degree a little bit more difficult because people wanted to turn things around in 3 weeks that should have taken 3 months. So we had a very stressful time, but very happy clients. And I suppose the thing to say is that you can never really, even though you might believe hugely in data, you might be a data science and you might be an entrepreneur with as a massive advocate of the project that you are currently working on, you might feel that it's the best thing in the whole world. But unless you're working with the right client, and actually you don't really have a business unless you have a client, unless you have the right clients, and they trust you enough to allow you to initiate that change, you know, you'll be extremely frustrated. And probably, I hope this is not a rude slide, but as a technologist, the control button is the one that most people would love to have, but we don't often have control on people's decision around when to start using data effectively. So I think to leave you with that as sort of my finding as an entrepreneur. So just to summarize, 5 years in business now, and initially the concept of accessing data that was completely it was being used once a year for an audit, but I could see the value in it. That was my initial concept, but without a very experienced data analyst to model the kind of data that I wanted to initially gather, then analyze, and then visualize, I wouldn't have been able to kick into my beta. And then once I got into my beta, I had to find those innovators. And I had to make a lot of changes. I had to get into a design partnership situation where what I thought I needed to supply people initially wasn't what they wanted at all. But they did want the data, they just didn't want the same data as I thought they wanted. So it's about being agile enough to change to the requirements. And then I suppose enter as many competitions as you can, get as much profile as you can, because it takes a while for you to find these early adopters. So to stay alive within that first part of the adoption curve, find all of the support you can and access it. And I think I'll leave you with that slide. So hopefully you enjoyed that. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for sharing with us your insights and your experiences, and especially being, well, let's say tech entrepreneur at the moment, and a recent one. That's extremely interesting to see how you have yourself learned what kinds of data, how to get your data, and who to contact or whom to partner with. That's, I think, some of the knowledge that Miguel Angel was also referring to before, that will be helpful for the dummies to kick off and start with. Thank you once again. And I want to remind all the attendees that we're collecting the questions through Q&A, and we would like to have a discussion at the end of all the presentations. So soon, because we have one more speaker to go, one more guest speaker to go. And I would like to welcome David, who is a business intelligence expert and the founder and the CEO of the consultancy Division Works, TVW, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, I hope.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, perfect. The consultancy focuses on strategy, innovation, and restructuring. And I think David will be able to share with us some insights from the business analytics and also in terms of crisis. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So can you see my screen and my presentation?
We can see your screen, but unfortunately we cannot hear you well.
It's better now?
Yes, this is much better now. Thank you, David.
Okay, no problem. So as you can see my screen. First thing, thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction. As you said, I am the founder of the VisionWorks, and the VisionWorks is a small but yet quite capable business consultancy. We have 12 employees at the moment, 12 consultants, and we are mainly working in 6 different fields. And there's 2 fields which are quite closely connected, and the one is restructuring, crisis prevention and crisis mitigation, and something what we call controlling 4.0, which is data in controlling. And I will later on describe why those fields are so closely interconnected. I don't want to bother you with all the other things we are working with. There's just one thing I want to show you is that we believe that especially working with data and risks and crisis, it's important as a consultancy to rely on accreditations, certifications, listings and stuff, and quality management, and that's what it's all about. So all our staff is trained in the various fields mentioned here, but I think that's enough about us, and let's go into the topic. Before I can talk about data in crisis, we should spend a few minutes on how business crisis usually work, and later on we can then see how important data is in the different crisis phases. Usually crises come in waves, they come unexpected, and I'm not talking about pandemics or something like that, more about the usual course of a business crisis. Why? Because if you are prepared for a business crisis as something that all entrepreneurs will experience at least one time in their course of a business, you are also better prepared for unexpected events like COVID-19. So as I said, usually crises come in waves, they come unexpected, and if you don't interfere, they usually end up with liquidation or discontinuation of the business. And there are potential turning points on the way of a crisis, and if you implement restructuring measures, you are hopefully able to come out of the crisis more sustainable, more healthy, more crisis-proof than before. But the thing is that before realizing a crisis, many entrepreneurs, and especially entrepreneurs and SMEs, miss a lot of opportunities for crisis prevention and or potential turning points because they actually don't realize that they already have a crisis. And the more or the later you realize a crisis, the more expensive and the more difficult it is to recover from the crisis. So missing those potential turning points actually is a high risk. And data, of course, is important to see that you have a crisis and to see your potential turning points. Those crises usually start long before you see a crisis in the company data or the typical company data that especially SMEs and younger entrepreneurs have. And this is the typical course of a crisis, and there's different models. I chose one which is divides the crisis into 6 different phases, starting with the stakeholder crisis, and then going to strategy crisis, sales crisis, earnings crisis, liquidity crisis, and at the end, insolvency. This is a very typical course, but actually in practice, you can see that it's quite realistic. The thing is that some of the phases might be longer or shorter, and sometimes companies skip one of those phases. But what is typical is that the speed of the crisis evolves over time. And at the same time, the controllability of the owners or the entrepreneurs, the management, goes down, and the pressure to act actually goes up. And I don't want to hold a lecture about crisis. We can do this on a different time. But of course, all those phases have certain characteristics and certain cause and effect relationships. But the important thing is that somewhere over there is the point where entrepreneurs usually realize that they have a crisis, especially SMEs and especially companies that don't have early warning systems implemented. And this may be, or it may happen that the crisis is already there for years and nobody realized it in the company because nobody looked at the data that in most of the times actually is available. So once people realize a crisis, usually there comes what we call the principle of hope. Entrepreneurs realize that there is a crisis, but they think it might go away by its own. It will be the next contract or the next project that solves everything, but then it doesn't. And then they wake, and then they start to implement, and they start to firefight, and they start to make decisions very fast. But the problem is, to make decisions very fast, what you actually need is data. And here we have summarized specific characteristics of SMEs and smaller companies that make those companies very vulnerable to crisis. And I don't want to go through all the details, but I want to emphasize on the data section here marked in red. Many entrepreneurs, many SMEs don't have suitable controlling systems implemented. They often have data coming from their tax advisors where they sometimes don't even look at, and then like Alper, I don't like to generalize, but what we see in practice is exactly that. There's no controlling. Even if data is available, people don't look at it. They don't have liquidity forecasting, they don't have integrated business planning, they don't have systematic price calculations, they don't recalculate their prices over time, and especially there is no exchange of data and information between sectors and divisions in the company. So these are typical characteristics that make SMEs very vulnerable to crisis. And if you want to resolve a crisis, you usually do it the opposite way or in the opposite phases of the crisis. So first you start to prevent the risk of insolvency. And what you need there is data. You need data about APs, so accounts receivables, accounts payables, and just examples of data needed to make decisions. To overcome the liquidity crisis, what you need is a liquidity forecast in the short term, like 12 or 13 or 15 weeks. And to overcome earning crisis and to make better decisions especially regarding financing, you need an integrated business planning, and so on and so on. So there is a need for data in all of the phases of restructuring. So as a short summary on the first section on crisis, what makes it so difficult for SMEs to resolve crisis is there is no blueprint. Each crisis in each company is different, and there's a high time pressure to make decisions, and this connected to having no data available makes it very, very complicated to make fact-based decisions. And to solve crisis, there is knowledge about leadership, about organizational restructuring and communication skills, and so on needed. So we want to emphasize on the no data section here. And what we say is, our hypothesis is that actually almost every company has important data available, but it's not utilized and it's not structured, and people don't use it. So when we try to help companies, SMEs in crisis and restructuring, we do a very short and very easy approach on making data available. What we do is we look what's already there, we define smart KPIs, we try to develop dashboards and reports, and then use those for decision making. I will show you an example at the end of my presentation, how easy that actually can be with data that everybody has available. So first step is that we go into all different directions, divisions of the company, and look for data that's already available. All the departments, all the divisions have Excel tables and stuff like that where they have important data, but it's usually not collected at one single point, and it's not utilized for the management. So first thing is we collect and see what's already there. And then based on that, we try to define KPIs. We try to find those indicators that are important for decision making in the situation, in the industry, for this specific company. And how do we do that? That's a very simple approach to define KPIs. What we do is that we do brainstormings with the team, with all the division leaders, and we have a list of potential KPIs for each of the sectors. And then we eliminate those that are too complicated or not useful, and then we have a kind of KPI library, which will then go into a process inside the company where they go for internal review. Then we need to operationalize them, implement them, and validate them. Sometimes in certain industries, we use external experts to help us to implement those KPIs. And then, of course, we start to monitor and actually utilize those data. And this is what we think is probably the most important, because we try to make the data available for decision making inside the company. And I brought you an example which is very easy to understand for entrepreneurs. Something that we developed for this presentation. And I will switch screens. I hope you can now see this dashboard. Can you see the dashboard?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. So before I show you the dashboard, I will show you an Excel file, which is like a typical Excel file, how you can find in almost every company. It shows the selling numbers of certain products. It shows you the segment, the country, the product, the discounts, units sold, and so on and so on. It's a very typical Excel sheet, like almost every entrepreneur has in their company, and it's quite good. It's quite structured, but what you actually see is nothing, because if you don't have a deeper look at the information, it doesn't provide you with any additional help. And the first step is that we do is we make this data available for decision making. And we use simple and actually most of the time quite cheap tools to do that. We use either Power BI, it's a Microsoft tool, or Tableau. I'm not sure if you're aware of those tools. They make data, or they help to visualize data, and that's what they do. They help to analyze and visualize, and they're actually quite cheap. For example, I don't want to do advertisements for Microsoft, but the professional version of Power BI costs around like €8.90 per month or something. So very cheap and very easy to use actually. So this is actually the data of this Excel sheet just visualized. And what we do is we try to develop dashboards that give the management an overview about their data, and it allows you, in this example, it's just one Excel sheet, but you can combine hundreds of information resources from databases, from Excel, from the web, and so on, and just combine them to one single dashboard. And this dashboard actually is interactive. So if you, for example, it shows you the gross sales and profit by year, and if you click on the sales, for example, for 2016, the data and all the rest of the table changes. So it allows you to do deep dives on the information that actually everybody has already. So for example, if we have a look at a certain product, we can filter by product, and then we see that by product one, we have profits that are actually negative in certain segments. So we can see the profit by segment in the enterprise sector is below zero, so it's negative. And we can do a deep dive again, clicking on the enterprise sector, and we see that Peter, one of our salespersons, actually had negative profits in his sales, maybe because he made too much discounts. So this allows us to utilize data that's already there and start to do decision making in a quite fast and easy way. So actually, I'm quite used to the tool, but using this data and making this dashboards took me about 2 hours. And this is a simple example, but this, as you can see, helps entrepreneurs to utilize the data that they already have and to make decisions quite fast, and that's what's needed during a crisis. So this is the example I wanted to show you. So I can switch back to the presentation. I hope this works. So yeah, that's what I wanted to bring into the discussion, how we work with data in the first place. Later on, of course, for decision making, you can do way more sophisticated data analysis. But in crisis, you need to be fast in the first place. I would like to recommend 3 of the other projects we are doing that give additional information that's also relevant to the target group, I guess, from the Smarter project, which actually works in the field of early warning for business health. You can find information there on early warning signs, crisis mitigation, crisis resilience, and 2 other projects we are working on. So yeah, you're highly recommended to visit those websites as well. And yeah, now I'm looking forward to questions and remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for your engaging presentation. And it's fantastic that you have also shown us an example of a simple application that we can use for the beginning of our data study journey, I'd say this way. Fantastic, thank you so much. I would like to thank all of our guest speakers for your brilliant presentations, and I think we can move to the discussion part and some questions from the audience, maybe from myself as well. For that, I would kindly ask David to stop sharing your screen, if that's okay for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so here you are.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. And I hope that now, when I put you in the gallery view, the participants will be able to see all of you together right now. Yes, I think so too. Well, wonderful. Great. Once again, thank you very much. And we have had several questions already rolling in, and I see that Miguel Angel also answered quite a number of questions. Maybe we will briefly come back to them just for the wider audience, those who didn't read the answers yet. But I think from the very start, to kick this off, I have a very let's say general question, but I think this question touches everybody at the moment. And that's of course connected to the COVID-19 and what your perspectives are on how micro and SME businesses, as well as new entrepreneurs and startups will use data or rethink of using data to stimulate their business growth in post-COVID-19 society. So after the crisis hopefully finalizes, if it does, how would the businesses transform in your opinion? And I'm very curious to hear also from Miguel Angel, who is a data scientist himself, and what's his perspective there too, but from all of you on this question.
Can I just come in?
Yeah. Sure,
I think,
please go ahead.
I think in the COVID era, one of the things that we face as SMEs is, you know, it gets tough economically, depending on the industry. You know, I see it like trying to get water out of stone. So we have to squeeze the stone to get water. It's not as easy as before. So for that, we need really targeted efforts to get rid of unnecessary costs or processes, and we need to be very effective. So in that sense, data gives us the direction and the evidence and points us to the right places. And again, as I said, it enables us to do twice as much as work in half the time. And in even more difficult conditions, I think we had the focus for crisis. So this is the right time. And the second thing is, I think most of the data skills that we are talking is also built on the premise of cloud. And COVID is making cloud much more viable for everything: communication, sharing, collaboration. So it's the right time, it's right for it. And finally, before COVID era, we had people who were we had the bigger divide where people didn't think that was necessary, that was urgent. I think there's now a sense of urgency. We can turn this into an opportunity.
Thank you, Alper. I think Anne-Marie and David, you both unmuted yourself as well to to get the answer to this question too.
Yeah, I completely agree with Alper. I think that the urgency is there, and as a company, we receive sort of 4 or 5 incoming urgent requirements and requests that we had to turn around very quickly. But I know that as a small company with limited resources, what I should be doing at the moment is going out to the people that have the same need, but I just haven't got around. Because as I said, I think that a lot of people have moved their mindset to the need for digital and data-based overview rather than just doing things for the sake of doing them, filling forms and doing the processes that you do every day for the sake of doing them. So I suppose we have some plans in place to get out to our target markets, but I've been a little bit of an evangelist for data for the last 4 or 5 years in a kind of an industry that is not disrupted, in the sort of quality assurance industry in my niche is not disrupted. So I suppose it's trying to I find with a lot of, like what you said, Al, for everybody is has taken their budgets and dropped them into COVID response, you know, like to stay alive. But I think within the next month or 2, people are going to start looking forward, and then's the time. And again, it's a difficult one because you don't want to be seen to be jumping on the back of the crisis, but you want to be seen to be bringing value of productivity in remote world to them through data. So that's what we're going to try and achieve. Recently, we were involved in a very large tender for a big public sector contract, and it collapsed after 6 months' work. The tender collapsed because of COVID. So we have reached out, and we have 2 fantastic companies, the Agile Executive and Profile Tree, that we're working with, and they're seen as innovators. So again, it's about being close to the innovators and supporting the companies for information, if that's all it is, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess David might also have something interesting to say there, considering that you are actually talking about the strategy and crisis for the businesses in crisis, and you might relate to what Anne-Marie is saying at the moment about the demand, and what are your perspectives?
Yeah, for me, what comes out clearly during this crisis, and we had a lot of our customers needed help in the last couple of months. What comes out clear to me is that data and IT is a matter of crisis resilience. So the better you are able to manage data and have all the resources available, this helps in so many aspects of crisis resilience. It's with regard to organizational structures, home office and stuff like that, but also with regard to decision-making processes and decision-making speed, and because that's what many companies needed. We helped a lot of companies to write liquidity plans and stuff like that, to help them to apply for public funding and public help by the German government. And what came out is that those companies that are capable of handling data in all respects of data science and IT, they are way better prepared for a crisis like that, and seem to recover faster than the others.
Thank you. Thank you, David, Anne-Marie, and Alper. And I was wondering what Miguel Angel could say as a data scientist, and probably you have seen quite an interesting uptake right now and the change,
Sure.
and you predict some changes too.
Sure. So just a couple of things that more related to data tracking and all this kind of stuff for the infection, for the unfolding on the infection. And the first reflection is that, okay, it has been something like a success and a failure, because we have had a lot of data, but very little reliable data. So for example, it depends on the country, but for example, in my country, you know, the ways of counting the infections, tracking the infections or whatever has been something like accounts from the beginning. And actually people that were early when the lockdown came, at some universities, they took these classic compartmental models. They started to do the simulations and predictions of when it would be probably the things would be probably get better or whatever. And at some point, that's very curious, they stopped doing that. Why? Because they say, okay, we have been doing and adjusting the models for 1 or 2 weeks, but we have found out that the data is not reliable. So it's nonsense. It's better not to publish the models, which is a funny thing. Okay, and that's so the quality of the data, the quality of the procedures, at least in some cases, is not good enough, and that's a reflection for open data also. Not everything is as good as we think. The second, regarding companies, just to give you 2 examples, because I have been approached by 2 companies that wanted to do something. And these are nice cases of the problem with ethical and regulatory concerns. The first one, in hospitality environments, so hotels and all this kind of stuff, they quickly went to the cameras for scanning the fever, you know, and which are used in airports or something like that. Regulation problem. That's personal data. The simple thing of this camera saying that you have that's personal data, requires consent, and in the airports it's okay because they have a special regulation, because an airport is a special place. But a lot of concerns were raised, not about the technology, which maybe was good enough and was prepared because it was in the airport, it was well developed with product, but the translation to a general use case had a problem with regulation and ethical concerns. The second was even worse because, and it's about the tracking apps. And then the tracking apps, to be effective, they need to be really random. If you rely on people that install voluntarily the app, is by definition biased. So again, that's not the artificial intelligence, that's not analytics, it's something else. And these 2 cases are 2 companies come to me just to try to propose something or fix something or whatever. And we had this barrier of, okay, it could be nice, but there are ethical and regulatory things in the middle that make that a bit difficult. So we need to bring also the lawyers and the people that think on this kind of stuff, saying what can be tracked, what is freedom and privacy. That's probably more important than the technology right now for this kind of thing.
That's very interesting. Both of the points are actually very interesting points that you bring up, and those are the reliability of the data that you collect and the ethics of how do you use it and also how you collect it actually. And I would like to go back to the first points that you mentioned and ask you all a question. I know that for Miguel Angel, who is a data scientist, the reliability of data can be a totally different conversation, but I'm wondering about Anne-Marie, David, and Alper, about you, since you're not fully data scientists, let's say this way, on how do you understand how reliable the data is that you have collected, and your analysis or whatever techniques you use that are easy, and as we have mentioned before, we call them for dummies, but they're not really, so medium, let's say. That's one question. And the second question is, how is it okay to do that without the domain knowledge? Miguel Angel actually answered this question a little bit in the Q&A chat, but I'm really curious to see your perspectives on that.
So from my point of view, I suppose the issue in terms of collecting data, our platform has the collection tool on it. We use open source analytics called Metabase, but in terms of collecting the data, that's where the pain lies. And the data that we collect is mandatory. So in terms of ethics, there isn't really any issue, and our system is built around GDPR, so everybody has to give permissions and people can only see what they need to see. But in terms of the reliability of the data, we try and prescribe our data via drop-downs, via absolute pre-prescribed, pre-populated. So in terms of ensuring that it's valid, the best way that we can do that is making our data capture apps very streamlined, very simple, and making it, there be no place to create confusion. Now, clients always want free text boxes, and they always want a place where you can write a note. And actually, we've been starting to use quite a bit of word clouds and stuff like that to look at, you know, not hard data, but more qualitative data rather than quantitative data. And I think that's very important as well, attitudinal stuff rather than just metrics. And but it is data. It's just not linear data, you know. So, and again, I'm not a scientist at all, but in terms of the value proposition that we give to our clients, it's really about the fact that these things were being gathered previously, but nobody was ever looking at them. Nobody ever had an overview of them. And so, so that's my answer. It's really defining the hard data into prescriptive drop-downs, and then using the softer data in a more qualitative way.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Maybe, can I come in, Alexandra?
Yes, of course.
I think I kind of try to live a few principles. One thing is, I think trust is good for the reliable data, but control is always better. So I always make sure that at the entrepreneurial level, I am involved at the design phase, structure phase for, you know, I'm talking about our own kind of work and data. So make sure that the structure and design has enough structure, just enough structure, but also allows freedom and flexibility for people. But this structure limits the errors. The second principle I use, I mentioned the agile principle. So, you know, regular, let's say, use of data, updates of data, you know, conversations about data, and validating with the real life work. And when you have these regular reviews that you use data every day like snack, then you can see these irregularities or you know, whatever the things that need to be validated. And also, you know, it's possible, it's obvious, but any data should be traceable, so we can go all the way to the source, so that I can validate. So if a report comes to me that I cannot drill down or go deeper as the executive, for me, I don't like that, and I don't want to have that. So I always do quick checks with that ability. So these are like three things: traceability, regular use, and then enough structure to regulate the kind of the errors. And the second thing you said is, do we need to be technical people or data scientists to work with data? Yeah, you know, I give always the example for any profession is, you know, so it's not for data. Um, Sorry for the analogy, but you don't have to be a chicken to understand what a good egg is. So you know, we are like, you know, we should be in a way to understand the quality of data, quality of the structures, quality of the flow processes, but we should leave the actual thing to data scientists, the technical, deep technical side, and that's getting more and more complicated every day. But that doesn't stop us to kind of have a let's say expert view on our business and using data for that view. So that's kind of the difference I would make.
Thank you, Alper, for the answer, and Anne-Marie, thank you a lot for the answer too. I was wondering, because David also unmuted himself, so I thought that David has also something to say there. Thank you.
Yes, with regard to quality of data, of course it's important, but for decision making in crisis, actually speed is more important up to a certain point. So what we do is, when we have data and collect data in the company, of course we validate it and we compare it with industry data, with data from competitors, if it's available. But it's also important to follow a kind of Pareto strategy, saying like, you know, 80% of the accuracy we might need for a first decision can be achieved with 20% of the effort. But this is just in the first phase of crisis, when days count, or sometimes hours count. I don't know exactly about the insolvency laws in all the jurisdictions, but the example in Germany, there is time frames set, and for those applications, when you have to file for insolvencies, and there is actually sometimes hours or even minutes count to meet those time frames. So yes, accuracy of data and quality of data is important, but in our case, in the first step, it's important to make decisions, to make a decision at all, and you have to rely on the data that's already there, and that's again referring to the crisis resilience. The better the data is inside the company, the better they are crisis proof.
Thanks, David, and especially bringing it from the crisis perspective, crisis management perspective. I guess what you have just mentioned, that the speed is more important there. Maybe it makes the difference to the structures in place that you collect and analyze the data, and the results also you want to achieve from those. But I still want to ask Miguel Angel this question, because he is the data scientist, and he is the one who has the tech knowledge and domain knowledge. And the same question to you as how, if I do not have the domain knowledge, I'm just a person who just starting, and how can I understand that my data is reliable? And how can I understand that the results that I get from my analysis are valid and they're not a mistake, or they're not a misinterpretation?
Yeah, oh, the question, the answer to the first is that, of course, the definition, the very early definitions of the data scientist is that it's a professional with a mixed skill set. And that skill set should include necessarily the domain knowledge. In reality, it's extremely hard to find somebody that really possesses the knowledge of a computer scientist and a statistician, and also somebody in a domain. That's very, very difficult. And the human resources that combine these three are very scarce. So actually, what often happens in reality is that you have something like a more data scientist more oriented to, let's say, the technical side, and then you have another people in the team for bringing the interdisciplinary aspect, or bringing the business or domain aspect. That's what really happens in most situations, because there are these super heroes of data. There are very few of them. That's one thing. Regarding the reliability, there are technical ways of looking at the reliability, and that's mostly a technical question, not a technical question of once you get the data, but how the data was acquired. This is why when we take data from the internet, in many cases, and that's very important, the provenance is not enough. So you have some data set right there, but you don't know how it was collected, who is behind that, and we have to focus more on providing provenance information, because there are very nice standards for that, but very little usage in large repositories. So it's something like the theory is there, but practice is lagging behind. Of course, in some cases, some data is better than none. So that's what you know, what you have. But this crisis has shown us that in general, governments are not prepared for releasing quality open data. In general, that's the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you. I think we would all agree here that the interdisciplinarity is also very important, and bringing a couple of people to play together, and might be too difficult for an entrepreneur doing it alone, but at the same time it's possible to dive into the tenets, I'll say, basic data science principles, and understand it first, and then see how you can work more with the professionals, let's say. I think, Anne-Marie, it was something also that you were doing, as far as I understood from your presentation from the beginning, and trying to, well, I wanted to ask this question to you actually right now about the challenges for you from the very beginning. What were the major challenges that you acquainted on your way, and especially with, well, diving into all the data science fundamentals, I'd say this way? Yeah.
The first thing is, I saw that question. I was just checking out there, and I saw that question about, you know, what were the challenges. The challenges are, they're not were, they're still very much real as an entrepreneur, and it still is very much up and down in business, although we are on a growth trajectory at the moment. I suppose in terms of data, creating data models and using something like Power BI is fantastic, and you can create lovely video and lovely on static data, but trying to create something on real-time data from a database and nightly builds and all of that kind of good stuff is a lot more complex. And you know, the UX of a system is normally like what the user wants is to be able to change drop downs, but if you change the drop down, that messes up your data. And so it's kind of balancing and actually keeping it very simple, defining what you need. And even though your Power BI can create an absolutely fabulous visual, you have to start at the beginning and get the stuff that's really, get your buckets really right, and get the stuff that's very linear, and then move from there onwards. So we have 3 areas that we're focusing on: attendance, certification, and evaluation. So those are our 3 core analytic pieces, but we've made loads of different attempts over periods to achieve that, and we're only now going live with some of those products. So the other thing is that we need to be forward thinking all the time about AI, and I know that every client I ever speak to sort of say it would be great if the machine knew what, because of the feedback, you know, what they wanted to do next, or because of the attendance, how to deal with the disciplinary, or because of the certification, what would be their obviously next program. And so we would love to actually employ, we employ 4 engineers, but none of them are specific data scientists. So I'd love to go down that route. And I think that SMEs are probably a bit afraid of just getting a very specialist data scientist because everybody has to do a small business with 12 people. But I think that's what my biggest challenge would be balancing customers' expectations with the realism of good real-time data. And then the second thing being keeping ahead of the curve and being able to not just be able to pull this data in real time, but now be able to use it for sort of informing them automatically.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, for actually answering it right now. And you could have written the answer, but I think it's very nice that you have told us the more extensive story, I'd say. And we have only a couple of minutes left for more questions. And I think there is this question that applies to all of you. And if we take a step back, or maybe even step forward from being entrepreneurs and talking from the perspective of a business owner, but to the business trainer, coach, or entrepreneurship educator. If I ask you this question from that perspective, I would like to hear what you have to say. If I'm an entrepreneurship educator, and I do want to help my advisees or my students, and I want to introduce them to the world of data, even though it might be basic skills. Where do I start? Miguel Angel has shown us this beautiful curriculum, and that's definitely a starting point as well. But Anne-Marie, David, and Alper, I'm wondering from your perspective, if you are not a data scientist yourself, but you are a successful business trainer, and you want to integrate some of the skills for the students, how do you approach it?
I would say just, I already took a snip of David's slide there, the one that about crisis and the value of data in crisis. And I would say that that's by far the best way, because people don't do things because they're nice to do. They do things because they have to do them. So I think that I already snipped that and sent that off to both my financial person and the chairman of my board. So I think if you want to engage people, it has to be for a real need, not because it would look really nice as a dashboard. So that's my opinion. So David, thank you. I learned a lot from your presentation.
Thanks. David, do you, what do you think?
Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm happy if you want, can discuss about this topic later on. We have way more slides on the topic. Regarding your question, this strongly, from my personal experience, this strongly depends on the, let's say, the life cycle of the company. Established companies that have a strong tradition, they often need to be convinced how important data is still, especially smaller companies, for example, in more traditional industries and sectors, many of them still need to be convinced about the importance. And as a trainer, what we do often is, start with convincing. This is totally different when we, for example, talk to students in entrepreneurship classes. It's more about what we do there is trying to teach them about change management and organizational learning to be, or to stay ahead of the competitors. That's important because they often have technologies in place which are like top notch, But it's important to understand like how to stay ahead of your competitors, especially when you're young, small, innovative companies. So the answer on your question is it depends on life cycle, branch, industry, and so on.
Thanks. No, thank you. And Alper, just maybe a couple of, let's say, keywords, maybe.
Yes, I think again, just building on David's comment, I think depends on the needs of the people that I work with, either as a client or as a team member. But generally, typical needs I have is one is like at the leadership team level, people are quite driven with the achievement. They want to do their results. So that's one leverage that I use. I show them how easy it becomes with the data-driven leadership to achieve results. But the second thing also at the team level, which is more common, is workload, being overwhelmed with work. And I also use data-driven leadership to enable them to maybe share their workload or to have less time for more things. I think these are the two main really leverages, the achievement and avoiding overload in my experience. But I think there are different needs. I would go by the need of the executive or the client or team member.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for this excellent discussion. I think we have covered a lot of interesting points and we were able to answer quite a number of questions from the audience. By the way, we were also able to answer the question in written form. Thank you, dear speakers, that you did that. All the attendees, you can take a look at the questions that were answered as well in Q&A. You just go to Answered tab and you can see an extensive description there. By the speakers who were answering the question. So once again, I would like to thank our guest speakers today, Alper, David, Anne-Marie, and Miguel Angel. Well, Miguel Angel is our consortium partner, but he participated in this discussion as well. And I'm really glad that we have had this opportunity and that you have joined us right now. I'm also very happy to say that we are almost closing, and this has been a really great segue into the next presentation, or the last presentation, but definitely not least presentation of all. That presentation will focus on the self-learning platform for developing basic data skills. So we were talking about the curriculum, then we were talking about the specific examples from life. But now we will take a look at the tool that entrepreneurs or business advisors or anybody can actually use to get on some level with their data skills and to improve to the extent that they can further build on them. And I would like to now change to the speaker view and say goodbye to the panelist view. It was very nice to see you all together in this view, but I'm going to, wait a second, just a second. Yes, so, yes, and I'm going to introduce Onya Hamil. She's from Kindness Consulting, and she will be our next speaker, who will show us the platform and will tell us how to navigate it.
Hi, Alex. Thank you. It won't be easy to follow all of our great guest speakers. I'm sure everyone will agree that how insightful their presentations were, and would like to thank them again for taking time out of their busy days to come and speak to us all today. But yes, my name is Onya Hamil from Kindness Consulting. Our role in the dataset project was the creation of the dataset online course, which I will take you through now. If I can just share my screen. Can you see that? Yeah, so just a bit about Kindness Consulting. we specialize in the creation of online courses and have particular expertise in entrepreneurship. We are based here in Northern Ireland in a place called Lisburn, but we have networks and we work all across Europe. We think, as mentioned today already, data is such a topical discussion at the minute, especially with its role in response to COVID-19, and how healthcare providers were able to, leverage data from countries that already faced the pandemic earlier, and forecast the needs of hospital beds and equipment such as ventilators and masks and things. And it's without the use of data, maybe they would have handled the situation a lot differently. And as our guest speakers touched on, possibly businesses can use data as well to navigate their way out of the COVID-19 situation. So yes, I'll go through the online course. It's just today I'm just going to show you how to navigate the website and access all the resources and things. So the online course objective, this course is specially designed for VET and HEI providers in entrepreneurship education, so they can efficiently improve business owners' understanding and knowledge of smart data skills to help grow their business. Our course is free online and can be accessed at the learner's own time, whenever suits them, if it's the weekends or the evenings or a little bit each day. Learning online really provides the opportunity to absorb the material. They're in no rush to do so, and this is why that we have done it in a bite-sized manner, and it's flexible, and you can use it on your tablets or your mobiles, your laptops. As we all know, entrepreneurs are usually lead very busy lifestyles, so that is to suit their needs. So the link to the dataset website is www.data-set.eu, and this is what it looks like here. It's just a wee screen recording of the website. Along the top here, you will find all the resources. So as Sonia and Miguel had presented on earlier today, you can find them under the resources here, available in Spanish, Danish and English. And as well, the course is available in English and Spanish. And so you just click the links here and this will take you to the resources. And then there's a bit about the project partners and about us, and news, which Alex was very on top of and has created numerous very insightful and interesting blogs. So here we have, so this is the second screen recording, shows what the online course looks like. And yes, you can see the modules at the bottom. And the link for that is www.data-set.eu/learning. I'll take it on to the next slide. So Dataset is split into 5 modules. Module 1 is Introduction to Big Data. Module 2, Improve your business with your own existing data. Module 3, Improve your business with external data. Module 4 looks at the legislation and ethics around big data. And Module 5 looks at the future of big data. So it is delivered in this 5-module format, designed in a way to let learners explore each module in detail and enable a greater understanding of the course in general. So the course is modular, which allows learners to dip in and out of modules as they choose. So if you find that maybe module 4, ethics around big data is more interesting to you, then you can skip right to that. However, we would recommend that you would start following the modules in the suggested 1 to 5 order, and just makes things more clear from the offset. So, and just this is how you access each module. Okay. So module 1, this is what it would look like when you click on this first link with the main presentation here. And so each module comprises of a main presentation. And then on the right hand side here, you can see a set of extra resources, which includes videos and additional reading resources and a learning workbook. And those can be used at any stage at which the learner decides that they can access it. So each module starts with a learning objective. So the objective of this module is to provide an overview of the basic information on big data. Upon completion of the module, you will comprehend the emerging role of big data, understand the key terms regarding big and smart data, know how big data can be turned into smart data, and be able to learn to apply the key terms regarding big data. So each module approximately should take 1 to 2 hours. But the information is very bite-sized, and you might get through the modules quite quick. A lot less time as we have suggested there, but we suggest that with the reading the extra resources and the videos and things, it might take that much time. And this is an overview of module 1. Again, each module will have an overview of what you're about to learn. So module 1 begins with an introduction to what big data is, and then it goes more into the specific principles of big data and the structure of data and different things. Each module will have case studies within. So we have case studies from Spotify and Indeed.com and Coca-Cola, and it really just showcases how these businesses use data in their business operations, and from boosting their brand recognition, and also from boosting their employer, or boosting their the brand recognition and the customer's experience as well. So Spotify are actually a very good example. They've created They've created a world music map that shows the listening habits and preferences of people in cities around the world. So by tapping into its resources of internal data that no other brand or organization has access to, Spotify creates original stories and insights that can't be found anywhere else. So it really it sets their business at a different level from everybody else's and makes them unique. So additional resources throughout the modules, the learner will be instructed to take breaks and view the additional resources available, all which are held at the right hand side of the presentation. So in module 1, the emerging role of big data in key development issues, opportunities, challenges and concerns is the first additional resource, and this paper presents a review on big data utilization in different development issues, and the different and it looks at its worthwhileness and usefulness and relevance today. So it really gives learners a deeper insight on data deployment in different economic sectors, and it facilitates learners to see the opportunities and challenges of data deployment and look at it in relation to their own businesses. So as well as reading material to complement the content within the presentations, we have also a number of media resources available. So in module 1, we have a TEDx talk from Donna Green, What is Big Data and Why Does It Matter? So Donna Green is an advanced data scientist, and she talks about, in her talk, what big data is, can it help us solve some of the society's big challenges? And she provides answer to these questions and other questions in this fact-filled and fascinating talk. So it's much like having our guest speakers on today. It's great to get insights from experts, and Donna Green's talk is very, especially if you don't know much about data, it's a good introductory video to learn from. So within each module, we also have learner workbooks, which the learner can download and use whenever they can. So these are also housed on the right-hand side of the presentation. And these learner workbooks are filled full of extra learn activities, exercises, case studies, and video links. And it really allows the learner to lead on their own study and think about data in context in relation to their own business, which can be very helpful. And obviously then the work that they've done, they can go through and see and come back to it whenever they want to refresh on the topic. So test your knowledge section, this is housed just under the presentation, where the arrow is pointing here. And the test your knowledge feature is very good. It allows the learner to see what they've learned and what they've managed to retain from the module. As well as that, you can see where you went, maybe what areas you need to focus on, what skills need improved, and as you can see, you can get your score out of 10. And the screen recording was just for the purposes of this presentation, so I didn't go through the quiz fully. And hopefully, if I did, I would get a better score than that. But once the user has submitted their questions or answers at the bottom, they will hit submit, and they will receive a score of 10. And it shows you not just what you got right, but it shows what you got wrong, so you can go back and see where you can focus on. So we have our dataset closed Facebook group, and this is to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and for informative discussion. Sonia from Momentum, she has put up a poll, and this is the kind of interactive post that we like to share and like for our members to get involved with. And if you have any advice or tips or questions, our partners are always on the dataset Facebook, ready to respond. So if you feel like joining today, please do so. So yeah, that's basically a quick run through of the dataset course. We set out to at the beginning of the project to make an introductory level course for entrepreneurs and entrepreneur educators to come in and develop their skills around the subject. And we hope that we've made a resource that would be valuable to our target group. And since the beginning, the online course has been live for 6 months or so now, and since then we have gained a lot of positive feedback. So we would really encourage everybody to go over to the website now or today or whenever they can, and really just browse through your resources and have a go at trying some of the modules. And in no time you'll have improved your data skills. And yeah, that's it. I just want to thank our guest speakers again today, and I'll hand you back over to Alex.
Thank you very much, Anya, for this great introduction of the course. It's actually a lot of fun. I really encourage everybody to take a look. I just sent the message in the chat with the link to the course, please take a look. It's now available, if I'm not mistaken, in 2 languages, in English and Spanish. So if you're a Spanish speaker, go ahead, try the Spanish one too. Yes, and so additional information, all our intellectual outputs can be found on our website, and they're easily available, freely available, www.data-set.eu. We highly encourage you to take a look and play around with them. So that was an excellent conclusion to this webinar. Now you have an additional tool that you can use to boost your data skills yourself. If you're an entrepreneurship educator, business advisor, or you're an entrepreneur yourself, and you also have a set of curriculum. If you are interested in also teaching the skills, and you have heard from a lot of interesting speakers today, and our guest speakers specifically being the live examples of people who are using data in different ways themselves, actually. I'm really happy with the questions and answers section as well. Thank you very much, all the participants that submitted the questions. I hope that you got your questions answered, and if you didn't, you can always reach out to our speakers and to our guest speakers as well. We will be circulating the follow-up email to all those who participated, with relevant links once again, and also with the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers, but you of course can find them yourself on LinkedIn and connect with them. But if not, still the follow-up email is coming soon to you. I would also like to highlight that this webinar was recorded. So the recording will be available on our website. You will be able to scroll through it and see the presentations that you would like to revisit once again. Yes, and I would like to maybe give a word to Jonathan if you would like to say something at the end of the webinar. If so, please, floor is yours.
Many thanks, Alex. And again, many thanks to all contributors today. I really appreciate the input that came from all of our guest speakers. I trust that, that everybody who managed to remain on the event will agree that it was insightful, interesting, and provocative at times. But I think we should all feel now that there is a better understanding of the importance of data, the importance of data to entrepreneurs and to the business leaders, and that in some small way, the resources that we've developed through our project are there to help. And I hope it does help you in your business journey. Please do, as Alex has said, visit our website. You'll see the address behind me here. There you will find all the resources. You can access them free of charge, and indeed, circulate to others who you feel might be able to benefit from them. So look, I am not going to say anything further than that, other than say again, thank you very much for attending. I hope it was worthwhile use of your time, and appreciate your involvement. Goodbye now.
Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye. And we do hope to see you on our website and checking our materials.